Hello and welcome back to the Sallie Tomato YouTube channel for our third segment in our Mystery Bag Sew Along series. We did a lot of sewing in our last segment, so we'll pick up where we left off. We'll finish using the remaining halves of the smaller magnetic snaps and continuing to build our bag. Thanks for following along. Remember, you can always pause the video or drop a comment below if you have questions. Let's head back to the sewing machine. Install the female half of the magnetic snap centered on the right side of your lining piece K exterior unit. This will be in the patchwork area. So the snap is centered and just above the seam, and that dimension is in your instructions. I'll give you a quick overview, but this is the same kind of insertion as we did for our patchwork pocket panel. And here I've actually used a piece of heavy stabilizer as a little extra protection for the fabrics that are going to be possibly in contact with the prongs. And then we'll add the metal washer. And if you'd like, you could also add a small piece of fusible interfacing to cover the metal hardware, the prongs that can be a little sharp. This will protect your lining fabrics. Place one pocket panel right side up over piece K unit, allowing the snap to engage. Align the sides and bottom edges and hold those layers together with sewing clips. And then we're going to go to the sewing machine and top stitch along the top fold edge of the pocket panel, beginning from the side edge, and then with a narrow allowance, following that fold edge, stitch up to the previous top stitching. That's the top stitching that you began and ended kind of in the middle of the panel. You'll pivot at that top stitching, top stitch a 1/4 inch down, and then pivot again, and top stitch back to the side edge, maintaining an even spacing to the top stitching above. You'll repeat this same step for the opposite edge of your pocket panel. Then you'll repeat all of these steps using the remaining piece K and the pocket panel. Just remember to add that snap to your piece K. Unclip the exterior layer of the pocket panel, folding it out of the way, and then using a removable pen or chalk, mark a vertical line in from each side edge on the wrong side of the pocket panel lining. Top stitch following both marked lines as close as possible to that top seam allowance to create the pocket. Be sure to stitch slowly, keeping the top layer of the pocket panel out of the stitching and the remaining layers smooth and flat. Then you'll refold the pocket panel, covering the pocket stitching. Baste the side and bottom edges. And then repeat these steps to complete the remaining pocket panel. Now on the wrong side, mark a center mark along the bottom edge of both of your pocket panels. Make sure your side panel top stitching aligns or closely aligns to the top stitching in your patchwork panel. I have one seam that lines up pretty nicely and one that's not quite as accurate, but I'm sure yours will be much more accurate than mine. With right sides together, align one main piece C, that's a side panel, to the right side edge of each pocket panel. You'll sew these together with the slightly wider seam allowance and then press, and I'm using my fingers, press piece C away from the pocket panel. If you find in pressing the side panel over the patchwork panel that it's very, very thick, if you still want to top stitch, you could trim away just a little bit of the side panel seam allowance. That will help reduce the bulk. Or another option, if you'd like, you could skip the top stitching. It's not critical, it's a beautiful touch, but sometimes machines don't always cooperate with that amount of bulk. So you could trim a little away and see if that helps for your project. And then top stitch with a narrow allowance on the side panel side of the seam. We aren't going to top stitch in the main patchwork panel. And stitch slowly. Top stitching always goes better when you stitch a little more slowly. One option that you might like to add is a metal handmade label. Install that on one side panel centered over your top stitching if you've added the vertical top stitching detail above the bottom edge. And be sure to visit our YouTube channel to watch a video on installing this hardware. With the pocket panels right sides together, align all the edges and then sew the remaining two side edges with the wider seam allowance, forming a tube. Before I sew the tube together, I'm actually going to top stitch my third seam. This will be a little easier flat than when everything's all together. Then I'll only have one seam to top stitch as a tube. Then carefully press and top stitch along the right side of the side panel seams. We're ready to center piece R, that's the stabilizer, on the wrong side of the main piece E, that's your base. You can use basting spray or basting tape to hold the stabilizer in place, and then top stitch following piece R, that's the stabilizer, close to the cut edge. Piece R is cut smaller than piece E so it doesn't get caught in the seam in the later step. And the firmness of the stabilizer is really going to help prevent the base of your bag from sagging as you use the bag. We'll repeat this step to add the fleece piece Q to the wrong side of our main piece A base. That's going to cover the stabilizer. And as an option, if you'd like, on the right side of the base, you could draw vertical and horizontal guidelines and then top stitch an 1/8 inch from each side of each guideline. It'll give a look of top stitching similar to your main patchwork panels, which is a nice detail. Another option is to install purse feet in from each corner on piece E from the right side, and we have detailed little steps in the pattern to mark in from each corner, and where the marks intersect, snip or punch small holes approximately an 1/8 inch diameter through all the layers, and then you'll insert one purse foot through each punched hole and secure the washers with the prongs. And as extra insurance or protection, fuse a scrap of interfacing over the prongs of the hardware. That's going to protect the lining fabric that will be resting on top of it. Now on the wrong side of the base, mark center at each edge. Also mark center on the wrong sides of each front, back, and side panel of the exterior bag or the tube along the bottom and top raw edges. We have marked 2 already, but just double check that they haven't worn away. Add these extra marks. And then with right sides together, center one long edge of the base along the bottom edge of one of the pocket panels. I'm ready to attach the base to the front of the bag at the pocket panel, but I'm finding it's easier to tuck the base inside the tube as I go to the machine. It'll just make it a little easier to maneuver under the machine. Sew those together with the wider seam allowance. Remember to start and stop in from the short sides of the base, so you aren't going to stitch all the way to the edge of the base. Use your seam allowance and start and stop just inside. Make sure to back stitch at this seam. You'll cut a small vertical line up to the last stitch of this seam. Be careful to not cut past or through the seam. For my second seam, I'm just folding the pocket panel to keep my base as flat as possible. You'll repeat these steps to attach the opposite long side of the base to the remaining back pocket panel. And with right sides together, match the center marks of the side panel and the base, aligning the raw edges. Again, you'll sew the layers together with that wider seam allowance. This time you can go from edge to edge, creating a boxed corner. Trim each corner then to reduce the bulk. Just be careful to not cut through the seam. And then you can turn the exterior to the right side. So exterior is turned right side out. Okay, time to step away from the machine to take a good stretch break or take a refreshing walk. I hope you're having fun and enjoying seeing your bag grow. Share a thought in the comment area below. That way we'll know how you're progressing. I hope you're loving your bag so far. I'll see you back here for the 4th segment of our Mystery Bag Sew Along series, where we're going to be focusing more on the lining fabrics. So until then, have a great making day.